It evoked a lot of nostalgia, but I didn't have a whole lot of fun playing the game. You're not really mastering a skill, and you're not really growing as a player. Today's game is called Spring Escape Deep Down by ELE, and this is the only thing they wanted me to know before going into it. So knowing that, let's play the game and then come back. Okay, I have just played Spring Escape Deep Down demo, and these are my first impressions. This game is a retro type of 2D platformer, kind of like my favorite type, honestly. I have such a deep nostalgia for these types of games. This really reminded me of Toe Jam and Earl, Earthworm Jim, a little bit of Sonic the Hedgehog. So this is a 2D action platformer. You play as a root system from a flower, which is kind of funny. The game is basically you have like a hub world. You enter a level and then you play throughout a linear type of level filled with action challenges and a little bit of puzzle challenges that harken back a little bit to Celeste, just a little bit, but mostly it's its own type of game. It has this main mechanic of digging. It evoked a lot of nostalgia, but I didn't have a whole lot of fun playing the game. And I think that might be the way that I viewed some of the level design. It feels kind of like Sonic when I play it, but it's not like Sonic. So it felt almost more like Bubsy. So if you think about how Sonic the Hedgehog plays, Sonic the Hedgehog is very much centered around momentum. They have very expansive levels, and in those levels, they don't have a whole lot of what I would call skill progression. I guess they don't have a skill progression curve. If you think about Mario, for example, you have a skill progression kind of curve where they present you with a challenge, a kind of simple challenge at first, and then it grows in complexity as you go along the level. You know, they introduce more of that challenge, easy one, medium, and then hard, and then they take that kind of block and they keep doing that, right? So that's what the levels basically are, is they're like blocks of little skill curves, I guess you could say. And Sonic is not that way at all. Sonic is very much mastering the transition between having momentum and little platforming pieces. But all the levels are very expansive in the sense that you can just kind of go everywhere that you want. This game, Spring Escape, doesn't really have very expansive levels, but I feel like it would benefit from it. The levels feel what I would call them compartmentalized. The reason why I feel that way is because when I first made my own levels, if you remember a game called N++, it's a platforming game where you play as kind of like this wall jumping type of ninja type of thing. It had these types of level editors that you could do. And in that game, I remember the first time that I made levels for that game, I wouldn't think of like the entire level at once. I would think of a challenge that I want the player to do. I would put it like a little challenge, something they have to dodge, and then I would make the next part of the level, which is like a little, I don't know, something else they have to dodge. And then I keep doing that. The issue with designing a level like that is that you really, really sacrifice flow, right? That's transitioning between spaces. Doom 2016 does flow really, really well. So when I did those types of levels for N, there's no real logic between all of these places. If you go from one compartmentalized piece to another, it feels like you're constantly having to change the way that you think. You're not really mastering a skill, and you're not really growing as a player. Spring Escape does have, I think, good holistic views of what levels should be. There are some times that I feel very, very good in the flow when I'm playing this game, like the green slime areas. The first time that you get to the green slime area, it shows you how to get to the green slime, what it is. You know, it forces the player to transition from dirt to slime, and then it shows how to go through slime in certain areas. So it introduces things step by step, and I think that's really good. But in some of the other parts of the game, it feels like it's more compartmentalized. It feels like I'm facing a specific challenge. Then once I get past that, then I go to a different challenge. Then I get past that and I go to a different challenge. And it feels like I'm not really mastering anything. It doesn't feel like I'm growing. This isn't necessarily a level design issue. I've talked about this before about how every mechanic can be good in its own way. It just depends on the way that you're doing it and the reasons why you're doing it in the first place. Some, compartmentalization might be really good for a game like WarioWare. In WarioWare, it wouldn't make sense to have flow from one level to the next. That would kind of make the whole game way too easy. WarioWare is kind of dead set on the idea that the player must think differently between each of these different little micro games. So the thing that I think needs to remain cohesive in a game like this is design philosophy. And I think that's basically what I didn't feel from this game, and the reason why it reminded me of Sonic but didn't play like Sonic. So design philosophy, the way that I would define it, is a type of experience that you want the player to have when you put your game out, right? It's the reason why you make your game in the first place. But the design philosophy for this whole thing doesn't really feel that strong to me. When I'm playing this game, I don't feel the need to be doing anything specific. Like, I feel like I'm playing a game for sure, but I don't really feel like I understand why I'm playing as this specific flower going through this specific thing. Actually, I'll tell you that I did have a lot of fun with the time attack modes, the modes where you play the game and you're trying to do a speed run of that level. And I think the reason why I like the speed run so much is because it gave me a very specific goal to go toward, and it says, hey, this is the reason why you're playing the game, right? And so when I played it, it felt like I had a very specific purpose to what I was doing, and I would do that. I went back and I played some Sega games just to try to understand what the design philosophy of those older games were like. I think that sometimes this game feels like it has some of those nostalgic characteristics in it where we are not being shown everything. Like, for example, there's 2 mechanics in here that are just not taught whatsoever. At least I didn't see them whatsoever. And so when I played the game and I had these extra mechanics and they're useful, I was thinking, well, why wasn't I taught those? But then I thought about, games like Vector Man or Sonic the Hedgehog. Like in Sonic 3, when you double tap A, you can do like a secondary type of thing with your shields and whatnot. Those things aren't ever taught in the game. So I imagine maybe this game was trying to evoke that same kind of nostalgia where you have some sort of secret mechanics in the game that you're not necessarily supposed to know unless you mess around with it and explore. And the gameplay doesn't always have to be purposed in this way, but it does feel like Spring Escape is trying to do that. It does feel like there's a narrative here that is trying to support all of the gameplay, right? It's trying to tell us the reason why we're playing what we're playing. Whatever the design philosophy here is, I believe it needs to be stronger. It just needs to be way more. And I know that this is a demo, so it feels like this is kind of a vertical slice of gameplay. And because of that, it feels like it might be weaker in terms of feeling like I'm growing as a player. There are moments in here that I like a lot. I really like the mini boss of all those drills chasing you. I thought that was a lot of fun. The boss itself, although I really did not like the boss because I'm not a fan of those types of bosses, it was really interesting and it was animated really, really well. So I really liked that idea. So that's everything I have to say in my first impressions. Let's move on to the devs' intentions. So I've got the devs' intentions right here. Before we move on, if you want to join the Patreon and support this channel going forward, there's a link in the description. There's also a exclusive podcast you can listen to. So check that out if you want. And let's move on. My first question was, what were you hoping that the player would feel while playing your game? This dev answered, I wanted the player to feel like slowly uncovering a world in a simple, easy to pick up and play adventure. Many times you'll be in awe at finding out a big environment or set piece. Other times you'll rush into obstacles, and other times you'll meet new mysterious characters that may or may not aid you. Oftentimes you're alone, but the world around you just feels richer and richer. Question number 2 was, why did you choose this experience instead of a different one? They answered, this game in many aspects is my first real game, the first commercial one, the one to really introduce a bigger scope and ongoing narrative. And with that, I wanted to create an experience of slowly discovering little bits of a small part of a much bigger world through the perspective of a character that knows just as much as you do about it. You're not out here for a high challenge or an epic adventure. The game wants to be simple, but really well done. Question number 3 was, were there specific moments, mechanics, or ideas that you built around that emotional goal? This dev answered, the environments were especially built around the idea of being a new creature uncovering a giant world. Not only are many locations way bigger in scale than the player character, but there's plenty of care on the environment details and the environment that gives you a sense of discovery pushing forward. A lot of the game's mechanics, obstacle-wise, tend to be built around this feeling of a cohesive world. You're not just interacting with random elements, but with real living parts of this world. That's really interesting. There doesn't seem to be a design philosophy in the intentions here, which is fine. The idea here is that we are a smaller character and we're in a much bigger world and we're trying to discover everything about it piece by piece. And it makes me think that I may not have explored as much as I could about this game. I know there was a bunch of things that were kind of off screen that I hadn't seen. There were like, for example, there was this moment that I had played the game again after I had completed it. And then when I played it again, I went to like this little off-screen area where there was like little objects. And this is what kind of reminded me of Bubsy, because in Bubsy, you have these little bonus stars that kind of guide the player in certain areas. So that's interesting about being a massive world with a small character, because when I played the game, I didn't really feel like it was a massive world with a smaller character. I did feel that in the hub world. And what's interesting about that is that this kind of level design that you have in the hub world is one that I think would work really well in the actual levels themselves. It's like when you think about big environments that are just kind of there, that the player explores around, I think of Metroidvanias the most. One of the games that I had played not too long ago was a very, very small Metroidvania called Ooh or something. And that one you're playing as like this, what's called a bomb caterpillar, I guess. When you're going through, it's a very, very small puzzle platform Metroidvania. It's really, really good, by the way. I would definitely recommend that game. So the game itself is very, very tiny, but the environment is gigantic, and it really feels like you're in this huge world, even though you're a very small character, and the levels themselves are very small. You know, it really feels like it's a miniature version of an expansive Metroidvania, but it still feels like there's a much bigger world than you. Same with another one called VVVVV, I think, or the letter V 6 times. Also is somewhat a puzzle platforming Metroidvania. And in that game, it also feels like you are in a huge world that is much bigger than you, but it doesn't play like a giant Metroidvania. It feels like a puzzle platformer that then also just happens to be an expansive Metroidvania when you look at your map and see where you're going. I think linear level design can still do this kind of thing, where the player, needs to kind of slow down and look at other areas. And I think maybe that's the reason why it reminded me of Sonic the Hedgehog a few times, because the level design in those older Sonic games was very much like that, where you had, 2 or 3 different set paths that the player could take, but they were just kind of expanded out to make it feel like it was one big cohesive level. And so the player could go from one path to the other, from one path to the other, and you're still going in one direction. You're still going from left to right, but you can go kind of top to bottom wherever you want. You can even go back to the left sometimes. It feels like a much bigger area, and you sometimes find secrets and everything like that. The hub world, I felt that because it felt like the levels were designed in such a way where you could kind of just explore the area, whereas the linear levels weren't designed for that way at all. It wasn't designed for exploration. There were some tidbits here and there where, you're hinting at other things that are within the level. It was cool to see that there's other places that you can get to, but it never felt like it was something that I wanted to do. And I think of collectathons like from, Ukulele or Banjo-Kazooie. In Spring Escape, it feels like what we're trying to do is just get through the level and not necessarily trying to explore certain areas. And I think one of the reasons why I never felt that way was because there was nothing pulling my attention toward those other areas other than maybe curiosity. I think if you want to reward the player for doing things, this is something I talked about with on my other channel, Games Over Coffee, way earlier, about Ukulele. Ukulele was from the same people who made Banjo-Kazooie. And Banjo-Kazooie does really, really well with their level design because it's a collectathon. They encourage the player to kind of go everywhere, right, in their environment. They go everywhere. And when you go to a very, very far place, you're rewarded with something really interesting. And that's something, I forgot what that's called, but that's a design technique. It's something that Ukulele does not do. And it's weird that it's made by the same people, but like Ukulele has these really, really big, giant, expansive levels. And like I said, I talked about this already. In that game, there's areas that you can go way far off and nothing is rewarded to the player. You can go over there and that's about it, right? It doesn't feel like there was a purpose to it. I do respect the types of revisits that you have here in the game. You can either play the level as just trying to get through the level, or you can try to play the level as a time attack kind of thing. I like those different modes. I think that's pretty cool. So, I could see that type of gameplay being beneficial for this type of game. If there were like specific types of things that I was trying to collect, and I did see in this game that there's that little meter that you have where you can collect all the money within the level, but that kind of feels optional. I think of the giant rings in Sonic the Hedgehog where you're trying to get to bonus levels in order to get Chaos Emeralds, right? So you try to find where those big rings are, and sometimes they're pretty hidden, right? And so you have to figure out how to get there. I think the game is super, super charming, like very charming. Even though I didn't really have fun while playing the game, it was so charming and so interesting that I kept wanting to come back to it. In fact, the music got stuck in my head and I found myself humming it, while I was walking around the studio here. And I kept thinking about it after I had played the game, and I wanted to go back to it and play it some more just so I could re-immerse myself in the world, because the world itself is so interesting. So in that case, I could see curiosity being a part of the thing that you want to draw from the player, but I think it takes more than that for gameplay mechanics. So that's everything I have to say about Spring Escape. So thank you so much, ELE, for submitting this game. This nostalgic, trip was really, really interesting. This retro type of stuff is so cool to me. I love that stuff. It really harkens back to my childhood, which is cool. If you want to talk about this kind of stuff in the Discord, there is a link in the description. You can join the Discord. That goes to any viewer here. If you want to join the Discord, there's a lot of developers in there that love talking about game design. That is everything. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you guys another time. Peace.